and there was a lot of rules and a lot of things in place. But in the past few years, there's been quite dramatic change in what's happening here in the kingdom. Things are moving quickly, changing quickly. Things that I never thought would happen have happened.
Hey expats and travelers, have you guys seen all of the changes going on in Saudi Arabia? Well, I'm Kaylee with Expats Everywhere, and I sit down with Rob, who has been there for several years, and he has actually seen these with his own eyes, what's going on in this country. So let's chat with him about what is happening there.
I'm Rob, and I'm originally from the United Kingdom. So I have a British passport, but I'm also lucky enough to travel now with an Irish passport as well. I currently reside in Saudi Arabia, in the eastern provinces. That is where all the oil is, basically. That's the part of Saudi Arabia that's very developed. And it's a lot of cities that have grown together in the last 50 years.
How long have you been in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I first came to Saudi Arabia 9 years ago, although I have had a little bit of time out. I went to China and Vietnam, but most of the time I've been in Saudi Arabia, and I did work in Oman as well.
Awesome. Okay, so when you initially arrived, let's say 9 years ago to Saudi Arabia, what were your first impressions? What was it like?
I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was very different at the time. It was the first time I'd worked outside the United Kingdom, and I've travelled extensively. But it's the first I've really been this far away. Most of my travelling had been within Europe, and although I had been to Canada, so I hadn't really travelled beyond that. So this was quite distant for me. When I first came here, I found it to be very different. Although after that, I went to China and Vietnam. I thought, well, actually, it's not that different to what we do in Europe, actually. It's pretty similar in many respects. Whereas their cultures are just another world to them. They are very, very different. So, yes, it's different. I found it to be very cheap. I found it to be a cheap place to live. I found the pace of life to be steady and slow. People were very friendly. The food was different. It was culturally different in the respect that it's a very religious country. It's very Muslim. And that is obviously respected everywhere throughout the kingdom. And there was a lot of rules and a lot of things in place. But in the past few years, there's been quite dramatic change in what's happening here in the kingdom. Things are moving quickly, changing quickly. Things that I never thought would happen have happened.
Okay. All right. We'll get to those changes in a minute. But first, I find it interesting that your first location moving abroad as an expat was Saudi Arabia. So what brought you there? Why did you move there?
Well, it's just basically how my career moved. I used to work in a different industry, and in about 2008, there was a global recession, and a lot of jobs were lost, and I was out of work, and my phone wasn't ringing, and I needed some income. I thought, well, one thing I could do, because I own my own property, was to rent a room out. So I thought I'd rent a room out. Someone would come along. I had various people come along, but they either weren't right or it wasn't right for them. And then a guy knocked on my door one day, and he was Saudi. And I said, oh, please come in. And he moved in. Wonderful gentleman, wonderful gentleman. I said, oh, Ahmed, why are you here? What brings you to the UK? He said, I come learn English. I come to learn English. And I thought, that's interesting. So I started doing some research. I thought maybe this is something I could do. And I got to know this guy very well. And 9 years later, just moving on from that, he did learn English. He got very good. And he did very well at the IELTS. And then he did a master's degree. And then he went and he's just completed a PhD in Uppsala University in Sweden, where he now lives. He resides over there, and his English is perfection.
Wow.
So that was what planted the seed. I went then and did a Cambridge CELTA, and I quite quickly flew out to Saudi Arabia. So there you go.
Wow, how interesting. Okay, so you mentioned some of the changes. What year would you say you started seeing changes, and why do you think there were changes going on in the country?
Well, changes happen cyclically throughout in many countries. They do. Countries go from liberal to conservative to liberal to conservative. They swing backwards and forwards. And in the 70s, Saudi Arabia had seen a degree of liberalization. And then 1979 is a big change that went very conservative. And that stayed for some time. And it's really a reaction to that. It's moved away. The people have said that we want more relaxing of rules. So this happened really more in the last 5 years, but certainly in the last 3 years with the new king and the new crown prince have made a massive difference. Many, many things. And I think the one that's most well known in the West was the allowing women to drive. Women were not permitted to drive for some reason. Everyone thought it would be terrible if they allowed women to drive, and it could never happen. And no one would allow it. There'd be riots in the streets. And just one day, the king said, women can drive from tomorrow. And within a few months, 250,000 licenses had been issued to women. And you'd see women driving on the road, and it was no problem whatsoever. In fact, I believe that the roads are safer now having women drivers on the road. So that happened, and there was no problem at all. And then now it's several million licenses have now been issued to women who drive. And to me, that's logical. They can drive to work, and you see many women in the workplace now. There were before, but you see a lot more than you used to, I think. So that's one example. And another big change was in restaurants and coffee shops and things like that. They always had two sections. One section for men, for what they call singles, but they don't single men, and one section for families, right? Keeping single people apart. That was what the aim was. Well, that's just disappeared now, right? So you go into restaurants and they're all mixed, everyone's sitting happily together, and there's no issues, no problem. So yeah, it's quite dramatic, the changes that are happening here. And they opened up tourist visas as well. We never ever, the only Westerners you would ever see here in Saudi Arabia were Westerners who worked here. Mm-hmm. And what they issued tourist visas, but then the pandemic came along and put a stop to that. But if you are a tourist now from most countries in the world, from the United States, you would think, oh, I won't mind having a look at Saudi Arabia. You can come here, you'll be very welcome. And they've made one of the changes they made. Another one was you could not stay in a room, by that a hotel room or something like that, with someone of the opposite sex, unless you were married to them or they're an immediate relative. But they realised this could be a problem with our tourist industry. Mm. So they've got rid of that rule. That rule's gone now. So people can stay in hotel rooms at the discretion of the management of hotels. And that's how it is now. So a lot of changes happening here, and I think it's very good.
Yeah, I mean, those are a lot of changes. As you know, and our viewers know, we used to live in Saudi, and this is before all of those changes. So I think when people ask us, the scariest place that you've ever been for traffic and driving, we would always say Saudi Arabia, because it was only men and it was crazy, and we literally would see accidents every single day. So I'm sure now that it's opened up a bit more, like you were saying, it's probably better that the women can drive and a little safer. But the same thing, Josh and I obviously had our marriage license when we would go stay at hotels that we had to show. Then we would go in the family side of sections for restaurants because we're married. But if Josh were to, pop into like the Starbucks on his own, he'd have to go on the single side. So it's interesting to hear about these different changes because, we were there just a few years ago, but we had a completely different experience. So interesting changes.
Well, it's interesting, an interesting story. I was driving home from work the other day with a colleague, and we're driving along, and people can be a bit crazy on the roads. And some person right in front of us, right? And we thought, so I said to my friend, look at this idiot. Look at this idiot here. Just look at this idiot. And we drove past, and it was a woman. And we felt really guilty. We thought, oh, sorry. So this has not happened to her. Yeah, sorry about that. No, she's all right. Don't scare her. So yeah, it's a big changing country now. Big changes.
Okay, so a lot of people are aware that Westerners or foreigners will live on compounds in Saudi Arabia. Do you live on a compound? Has that changed, the compound life, or can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I do live on a very secure compound that a lot of my American friends just used to refer to. Oh, you live on Supermax, do you? Because it's a very secure compound where I live. But I've lived off compounds as well, and I like living off compounds. I find them to be more convenient because where I live is a long way from where I work. It's a long way from anywhere. It's miles out of the city that I live in. So that I find inconvenient. The life on the compound, yes, it's very it's very liberal. Everyone does what they want here. It's no. You don't see women in abayas. It's a very normal environment. But as I said, I didn't mind living off compounds in other parts of cities. I've lived in Riyadh, I've lived in Jeddah, I've lived in Jizan, I've lived in a small town called Al Aflaj, and I've lived. That's about it, I think. All those places. So quite a few places. But,
what city has been your favorite to live in?
Oh, I have fond memories of all the places I've lived in. Actually, I don't mind Riyadh. I quite like Riyadh as a city. Jeddah has the reputation for being the most liberal part of the country. Jizan has a different climate. It's next to Yemen. It's more mountainous. The scenery there is far more spectacular, whereas a lot of the country can be very dusty and sandy and not very nice to see. But in Jizan, it's just beautiful scenery. It's on the Red Sea as well. It's quite nice. I have they grow mangoes, a lot of agriculture down there. So it's quite nice down there. Yeah, I quite like that. And the eastern province, which is Daman, Dhahran, Khobar, they're all very close to Bahrain. Now, Bahrain, as you may or may not know, is a small island that's linked to Saudi Arabia by a road, causeway. And you can drive in just less than an hour. You're from Saudi Arabia, in the middle of Bahrain. And it's completely liberal society. They have alcohol there, and they have men and women mixing, and it's all just a party. It's just people go there for weekend partying. Saudis do as well. Everybody goes there for the weekend. So that makes this area different, and the fact you can just very quickly go to Bahrain if you want. And I know there are people who live in Bahrain and commute over here to Saudi Arabia. So that happens as well.
Okay, so whether you're on a compound or not, have you been able to mix with locals, or what is that like, getting to know the Saudis?
Yeah, I have personally. I've always found them to be very, very friendly people. If they know you, they will give you their heart. They'll give you anything. They're very generous-hearted people. If they don't know you, they'll try and take advantage of you, and they'll be they won't treat you very well. But if they know you, there are probably no more generous people anywhere in the world. They really are friendly, nice people. I remember before I came to Saudi Arabia, I talked to a guy. I was working at a language school in the UK, and he was a manager at Saudi, and I was going to go to Saudi. My plan was to go straight away to Saudi. So I asked him, "Oh, what's Saudi like in Saudi?" Oh, he said, "Well, I've never been in anyone's house. I've never visited. I've been there like 12 years. I've never even been in a single Saudi house. It's not in their culture. That was not my experience. I was invited to people's houses. I went to 3 weddings quite quickly in Saudi Arabia. They're very different because if you go to a wedding, you don't see any women as a man. You are just in the men's part of the wedding. The women's part, I don't even know where that was. So you don't see the bride and groom. You just see the groom, and you just have a party with his friends and chat to people and talk to people, have a lovely meal, and so that's quite different to what we're used to where we are. But very nice and very welcoming. As I said, people are very, very well. If you speak to them, and a lot of them want to practice English, and when you find those educated ones who've spent time in the United States or spent time in the UK or other Western countries, they're always keen to sort of like have conversations with you and talk to people, and they're very, very friendly. I've found very little animosity. As I always say to anybody, you are safer on the streets of Saudi Arabia than you are on the streets of London or any major Western city. You are much more likely to be involved in a violent incident in Western cities, in the UK certainly, than you are in Saudi Arabia. Far more likely. The statistics show it. The crime statistics are far worse in the UK than they are in Saudi Arabia. So it's a very safe and very welcoming society to be in. I've never heard of any major incidents involving Westerners at all.
Well, that's good to know for people who are going to be moving there, might be a little nervous about the safety because of what we see on the news or just the uncertainties of what this country is like because it has been closed off for so long. So it's good to know that it is safe, and you can give that comparison of safety from U.S. cities or UK cities or anywhere in the West. So let me ask you this. If someone is moving there and they're seeking a good expat community, what city would you recommend that they move to if they get that choice? Like, where's a good expat community for them?
Well, Saudi Arabia is an unusual country in the fact that it's a large geographic area. I believe it's 20 times the size of England, about 10 times the size of the UK, yet it has only 35 million people, whereas the United Kingdom has 65 million people. The United States has 350, 400 million, I don't know how many. So those countries are more densely populated, and this country was always nomadic. There were no major settlements. The year I was born, there was 100,000 people lived in the city of Riyadh. Wow. Now, there's nearly 9 million people living in Riyadh. It's huge growth. So these are new places, new cities, but there aren't many of them. There aren't many cities. In England, if I said I could reel off cities of 500,000 people, Nottingham, Birmingham, Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, Bristol, Cardiff, Glasgow, Edinburgh, London, Southampton. There's many, many cities. Here there aren't many. You've got Riyadh with its vast population, Jeddah, which is the second city. Then in the south you've got Abha, Khamis Mushrate, which by the way have fantastic weather. There we go, they have fantastic weather because they're in the mountains, so they're better weather than anywhere else. And here you have the Eastern Province, which is they always refer to as Dammam, but it's really a lot of towns that have grown together and has a population of about 4 million people. All of those cities have expat communities, but there are even the smaller ones like Taif, Tabuk, Najran, Jazan, as I've mentioned, have expat communities. You will find them everywhere. And you can usually you will bump into Westerners if you go into any Western restaurant chains. There's a lot of American Western restaurant chains here. A lot we don't have in the UK. Are here. They are here in Saudi Arabia. And so they're very nice. Very expensive, but now they're very expensive. That's something I'll come on to later. So you will find them, you will be very unlikely not to meet large numbers of people who are expats. You will find them here as well in the Eastern Provinces, the biggest one, because Saudi Aramco is based here. Saudi Aramco is the oil company, and traditionally has had large numbers of expertise from Western countries, all living and working in the oil industry. So there's lots and lots over here.
Okay, well, that's good to know for people who are moving. Another thing that I
Yeah.
think will interest people who are moving is, like, when you first got there, what obstacles did you find? Like, what were some challenges that you had to overcome, and then how did you overcome them?
You must learn to be patient in Saudi Arabia. Things don't happen in the way customer service is a different thing here. It means something else. When somebody says, "Oh, I'll be ready in 20 minutes," that does not mean what it does. That'll mean an hour, 2 hours. If you say, and the classic that people always say is, if you need something doing, it'll be done tomorrow, or as they use the Arabic word bukra, say bukra, tomorrow. It won't be done tomorrow. It'll be the day after, or the day after, and the day after, and the day after. You have to be very patient. Things don't happen. You walk into a bank and you say, "Oh, this looks like a bank just like home." You know, you've got the tellers there sitting behind. "Oh, I'll be here about 5 minutes." "Oh, no, you'll be there an hour." It will take you a long time to do simple things in the West that are very, very straightforward and we take for granted. Here, the pace of life is very steady and slow, and it goes at the Saudi pace, not our pace.
Good to know. Just cultural differences, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, you mentioned the Western restaurants or the American restaurant chains being expensive. So have you seen a big shift in how much stuff has cost since all of these changes that you talked about, or what are the expenses like, cost of living?
Yeah, when I first came here, there were several factors. One was in 2013, Saudi Arabia had a national debt of 11% of its economy, very, very low, had massive reserves of cash and oil. But as we know, there's been a lot of volatility in the oil industry, and the price of oil went very, very low. Price of oil goes very low, Saudi Arabia has no money. And very quickly, it was spending money that meant that if it continued at that pace, it would completely run out within 5 years. So there had to be major changes to the fiscal policy here. So they, first of all, changed the tax, the sales tax, which we call VAT in the UK and other countries around the world, which was 0%, suddenly became 5%. But last summer, even worse, they made that 15%.
Whoa, what a big
So,
jump.
so when you go in a restaurant and a bill for a meal for two might have been, say, 300 reals, which would be, I'm thinking in terms of sterling, that would be £60. That's gone up 10% straight away. That's gone up £66. And you've got quite significant inflation happening in the country at the moment. Or the price of petrol or gasoline, when I first came here, was cheaper than water. Water was far more expensive. A bottle of water, still very cheap, but petrol was like 10 cents a gallon. Right now, petrol is about 80 cents a gallon, 90 cents a gallon. It's gone up significantly. From, well, that's like 10 times, more than 10 times the price it was. If people now think about journeys, and they're just introducing a new law now based on the car you drive. If you drive a big gas guzzler, you are going to pay a lot more tax on that car than you ever have before. So new taxes, new laws, pushing up prices. And the other thing they've been trying to do is Saudicize the country, create jobs for Saudi Arabian people. Because it has a very young population, and they did have, the population growth has slowed, but obviously with a very young population, they need to create jobs. and they have been desperately trying to get as many positions for Saudis as they can. The company I work for would have never naturally had Saudis working at it, but now they have to aim for, I think, 75% Saudi workforce.
Okay, so they've got quotas now.
You have to fill the quotas, and certain roles can only be for Saudis. And one example that springs to mind is hotel management. All hotel management can only be Saudis now. You can't have an Egyptian or a Lebanese or anybody else who may speak perfect Arabic. Not allowed. Has to be Saudi. And the telecoms, telephone industry, anyone who works in the telephone, you sell telephones, mend telephones, have to be Saudi. You cannot be any other nationality. So there's been huge changes in that respect in the workforce out there, and then they bring in the tourism. That's trying to create 9%, grow the economy by 9% to create tens of thousands of jobs, and they're creating new cities. One called Neom, which you may have heard of, which is where they're going to have the Grand Prix, and it's going to be big theme parks and a fantastic oasis in the desert of pleasure and fun for families and for everybody. It's going to be a great place to go. And then there's Qiddiya. That's Qiddiya, and Neom is a place near the Red Sea towards Egypt that they're creating as well. So, yeah, a lot of things like that are happening.
Yeah, it sounds like a big shift.
Yeah, big shift there.
And I think that Saudi Arabia has been known for quite a while for foreigners to go there and have really good like expat packages, right? You're on a good salary, you don't pay taxes, you have a lot of stuff paid for. So are we seeing a decline in that, or are we still seeing those packages, or are those packages now, are the salaries going up because the cost of living is going up, or what have you seen as far as that kind of ratio of how much money you make and the package you're on compared to all these shifts that are happening with taxes and cost of living?
My personal situation has never been as good in my life. I've never had the excess of money and salaries that I have now. I was sitting in a room with a group of teachers the other day, and we were talking about properties, where we're buying properties, how many properties people earn. So I've got another property, I've just bought another one. Oh, I'm buying another two, one in London, but I'm buying one in Poland as well. I've got 3 in the Czech Republic. People are talking about this, and then we were discussing traded funds around the world and whether we should put it to Bitcoin, or so I said, well, I'll just put 5,000 into Amazon, and then I put another 20,000 into another company. And this discussion was going on, and as a colleague of mine walked in, he looked at me and said, only in Saudi would these conversations take place. You know, if I was in Spain, you'd be talking about, have I got enough money to pay the rent this month? You know, and I thought, yeah, the same in Vietnam, places like that where I've worked. You know, you'd be, well, that's this month. No, I managed to survive. Well, I've got 2 weeks till payday. Well, it just doesn't happen here. You earn very high salaries still. The packages are enormous still, but you have to work for them. You don't fall into jobs. You have to be qualified. They don't take, oh, I'm a teacher. What we call, someone would term a backpacker who's not qualified. That's not going to happen. You need to get your qualifications and be time served. And if you're experienced, you have the right qualifications, you can earn fabulous salaries here in Saudi Arabia.
And what currency do you get paid in?
Well, I'm a slightly special situation. I work for a major British company, so most of my contracted salary is actually in sterling, but I get that paid into Saudi British Bank, which is also a contractual arrangement with my company. We have to use that bank account, and it's converted into Saudi Riyal. So we receive it in Saudi Riyals, but it varies how much you get every month. However, on top of that, we get allowances, and I get allowances of 2,000 riyals a year paid additional, and that's just in riyals. So that doesn't change, and that's paid into my account as well. That's allowances to go to travel and just your general expenses of being here. So it's, and you can get more if you have families. People get more if they have children. You can get money from your wife and things like that. So, although to be fair, they've also introduced a new tax. So if you are married, the company will say, right, you're married, you've now got to pay a 200 riyal a month tax on your wife being here.
Oh.
You have to pay that once a year, and if you're married and you've got 2 kids, you get to pay tax for them as well. What they call the dependent tax. So there's the dependent tax being introduced as well. It's not huge, but it's you have to do it. You'd rather not do it.
Yeah, take that into account when you're thinking numbers and everything. Yeah. Okay, we've talked a lot about the different shifts, and you have been there for a while. You have a lot of experience with all these changes. So in your prediction or your mind, what do you think is the next big shift or big change happening in Saudi Arabia?
Oh, it's very difficult to say exactly. I think there's going to be further liberalization. Without being too controversial on the subject, I believe there will be some allowance for people to drink alcohol here coming into play, in a similar way to how they do that in the United Arab Emirates and Oman, where Westerners are allowed to consume alcohol in certain hotels, usually 5-star hotels and things like that. I think that will probably come into play, particularly with next year the World Cup is coming up, which is a great opportunity for Saudi Arabia to attract tourists from Qatar, where they will be in vast numbers. So maybe something like that could happen. I might be wrong. Maybe that never happened. But I think somebody did suggest, no, there's been contracts awarded, and you hear rumors all the time of things like this. I think there will be more outward-looking Saudi Arabia. There will be more Saudis. Saudis will never stop all Westerners working here, because it works 2 ways. There are a lot of very highly educated Saudis working in the United States of America. I know a guy who's doing research into cancer in through Harvard University. He's been years doing that. And there are people all over. They've got top scientists, top doctors, very, very highly educated guys, and they're not going to say no one can come to Saudi Arabia, because, well, hold on, it's Saudis go to other countries. There's going to be a mix of some allowed both ways, as it should be. You know, in all societies are going to need different people for different skills. So there will be a continuous growth. There will be continued work here in the future.
Okay, great. Well, before we get to our final question that we love to ask our expats, let me ask you this. Someone wants to move to Saudi or has a contract and is ready to move. What is a good piece of advice you would give them as they get ready to move?
As soon as you arrive at the airport, walk up to the desk that says STC, get yourself a SIM, all right? Put it in your phone immediately, and put some money on it. They'll give you a card, give you a voucher, so you can straight away use the internet. Otherwise, this can take you days to sort out. Don't let it be days. Do it at the airport as soon as you arrive. So that would be the first thing. Other than that, relax and enjoy. Be open-minded, and work hard and respect the culture and the country that you're in. It's a good country. Don't believe all the myths. Speak to the locals. Speak to people who've been here, and you will see it's actually a really nice place to live. It's a good country of good people. So don't listen to hype and hyperbole and the things that are not necessarily true. Don't be scared.
Awesome advice. Okay, well, at Expats Everywhere, we believe that living abroad transforms lives. So, how has living in Saudi Arabia and just abroad in general, because you've been to a few other places, how has it transformed your life?
Oh, tremendously. It's I love travel. I love it. I got the, once you start doing it, you get that bug. You want to be away. You want to see different places. You want to experience places. And when you're here in Saudi Arabia as well, you look around because we've got good money. I've got a week off. We've got a few days off. Now the pandemic has caused problems with people traveling, but now we are starting to. If you've been double dosed, you can travel to certain places, and not to our chagrin and annoyance, I can't easily go back to the UK because the UK is still charging ridiculous amounts of money for COVID tests and calling Saudi Arabia an amber country, not a green country as it should be, but that's the choice of people in the UK. So because of that, we have to look at elsewhere. And I just booked a trip to Georgia, in Tbilisi, in the former Soviet Union, because you can fly directly from Dammam to there. So that's where I'm going to go. It's broadened and I'm looking forward to that because I've never been there before. But yes, so many places I've seen. I've met so many amazing people. The one country I've not visited is the United States of America.
Really?
I've never been, but in my career abroad, I've got so many great American friends, and I keep thinking, I just want to go and visit everybody and go to this town and this place, and it's on the list.
Mm-hmm.
But they always say if you enjoy travel, you need one of two things. You need two things. You need time and money, and when you've got one, you don't have the other.
Right.
That's always the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So you try to get them both, but if once one goes, then you lose the other and whatever. So take those opportunities. If you are working, I say to anyone, take those opportunities, travel, see the world and enjoy it.
If you want another perspective about life in Saudi Arabia, then click this playlist right here. Now let's get moving.